I call to order Public Health Hospital District Number 4 Board of Commissioner regular meeting. It is 6:32. And could you please do the roll call for us?
President Norris.
Here.
Vice President Herring.
Here.
Secretary Spikers.
Here.
Commissioner Young. Here. Commissioner Pollard.
Here. I was supposed to do the flag salute, then the roll call.
No, it says on the agenda, call to order, flag salute. Well, we'll do the flag salute
Doesn't
now.
matter, but that's why I stood up.
Yeah, really. Get it done. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move we approve the agenda.
I'll second.
A comment on the agenda. I'd like to introduce an item for the agenda for board's consideration, and that would be a executive session pursuant to the allowance for executive session to discuss a potential item of litigation or legal issues.
Where would you like to put that executive session?
Up to the board where they'd like it.
Does
Probably
anybody?
before.
Whatever is the most convenient, that's fine.
Yeah.
Does anybody have a thought? We need to get it in here to approve this.
I suggest we do it right after the consent agenda.
Okay.
And get
Consent
it out of the way.
Well, you know, we're gonna,
No.
executive meeting, right? Did you say?
Executive session.
It will be
Should be-
executive. Maybe, how
I
about,
move that I second
After
that.
the-
Let's go ahead and discuss it while we're all fresh.
Yeah.
Okay.
so when do you want it? Right now or at the end? Right now?
Well, yeah, let's do it right now. I don't see anybody in the audience, so
Yeah, I think that's okay.
Except for Scott.
Scott, oh,
Familiar
sorry.
face there.
Scott,
Familiar face. Is that? Yeah.
Okay,
you
so,
blend in with your tan jacket.
Okay, then I guess we need to withdraw the motion that
Yes.
approves the agenda. I hereby withdraw the motion, and you may want to withdraw.
all
the
right,
second.
does somebody want to place the executive session somewhere on this agenda?
I make a motion that we place the executive session after the consent agenda before the committee reports.
All righty.
I'll second it.
That's what I.
Is there any other discussion?
Madam President,
Yes.
just so you're aware, you'll need to, when you go into executive session, identify the purpose. And the purpose is to discuss with legal counsel representing the agency matters relating to agency enforcement actions, or to discuss with legal counsel representing the agency litigation or potential litigation to which the agency, the governing body, or a member acting in an official capacity is or is likely to become a party when public knowledge regarding the discussion is likely to result in an adverse legal or financial consequence to the agency, and that is RCW 42.30.110,
42.
parens I.
She has
I have
Okay.
a copy of it.
statement for you.
I just wanted to make sure that.
So you've
wanna-
made that and it's now on the record,
All right,
correct?
Thank you, Madam President.
Yes, all right, so we now have that on record. Does everybody understand what he's, okay. We've placed it under the executive session under the consent agenda after we've gone through approval of the minutes and the physician credentialing. Do I have a motion?
I think we did
you
already.
just have
And we have a
to
second?
Yes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. All right, it's done.
How long do you think this is going to be?
I estimated 20 minutes at the most.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. Okay, so we have approval of the agenda, correct? And now public comment. Do we have any public comment? And we do.
So, for the record, Scott Scowcroft, West Seattle, and I just wanted to mention that, saw that the affiliation is not on the agenda. Perhaps it'll be in the CEO report. I just hope that the board is not going to lose focus or momentum in terms of partnering or affiliation. And I'd like to encourage you to consider coming up with a burdened feasibility viability study. In other words, as you know, I think that the burden model would be really great, but why even bother going down that path if it isn't viable. And to me, it's a really simple three-step process. One is, can a regional healthcare provider provide good acute care at the hospital and clinic? The second is, can you come up with some methodology where there would be an acceptable debt management that this organization could have? And then the third is, would there be enough funds left over to adequately fund public health initiatives? So really, out of the three, the first one is a given. The people that you're talking to, of course, will be able to provide great acute care. Secondly, unlike the RFP process where you say, well, you come up with something and we'll consider it, I'm suggesting that you come up with something, that you crunch the numbers and come up with one or two pathways that others can see themselves managing the debt in a way that's acceptable to you and still run acute care. And if you can't do that, if you can't crunch the numbers, then it's game over. Why even bother going to the next step? And then the third is this feasibility viability study would come up with a reasonable amount of money that would be left over due to leases or taxes or whatever the revenue sources are. And as I said last month, if it's $10,000 a year, then who cares? But if it's $1 million a year, then we're really talking about something. And once you have that study in hand, and a really good one, then it should be easier to go out to the potential healthcare providers, the organizations, and sell it to them. And it should be easier for you to go to the community and to say, this is what we've come up with, and what do you think? So you get support from the community, and you get something that is attractive to the regional healthcare providers.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? I don't think so. Okay, so communications. Tom, I guess I have to go first.
You don't have to.
I've had communications from Sue Mackey, as has the rest of the board, I assume. And also,
You did get the recent one I sent you?
yes,
Okay, good.
Sue Mackey
Oh, yes.
and Ryan Mueller, is that Ryan's last name?
Mueller.
Yeah. So, and I have responded to both of them. I would have thought politely, but just so that everybody knows that I have emails, and I know most of you have the same emails as I do. But I just think as a matter of record, we need to say that we've all heard from them, or at least I have.
Mm-hmm.
So
I
I
did.
think I got your response to one of them. Did we get copies of your responses to both?
I don't know. Usually
Yes.
I really try hard to make sure everybody knows what I say.
I get yours, yeah.
Yeah, so I suspect. Yeah. So, and if you have any disagreements or concerns about what I've said, I would be totally open to hearing what folks have to say. I just really feel strongly that we should all know what's being said about us as a board and as individuals as we move forward. So that's why I wanted to bring that up. So that's all I have to say, and I will turn over to CEO Tom Parker.
Thank you. You have in your packets my board report, and it's available for the public. I'll start with our affiliation strategy. I've made initial contact via phone or in-person meetings with representatives from Evergreen Health, Multi-Care Health System, Overlake Medical Center, Virginia Mason, and UW Medicine. Each party has expressed interest in further discussion with me, given that we are approaching affiliation with a more flexible position regarding our goals and related deal provisions. I plan to provide the board with a more detailed report, along with recommendations for moving forward at our April work study session this month. Parenthetically, I do have follow-up phone and in-person meetings scheduled with 3 of the 5 for next week, so I will be able to provide you with more detail, as I said, at our work study session. Finances, the report this evening will show that February there was a net loss of $45,000, but that was compared to a budget net loss of $209,000. Typically, we do see ourselves budgeting losses in February due to the fact that it's a short month. Also, just a note, for the first quarter, this year we did not include revenue related to the 340B program or the Rural Health Clinic. so that comes later in the year. Unrestricted cash rose to $9.2 million. As of the end of February, year-to-date, our net income is at $226,000 compared to a budgeted loss of $137,000. So quite a favorable gap or variance there. Average daily census in February was 22.7 compared to our budget of 22. That's a 91% occupancy rate. ED visits in February were lower than usual, 286, which is 5% under budget. By the way, they're on budget year to date. Operating expenses in February were 7% under budget. That was $193,000 under budget. In March, we'll preview here, our inpatient average daily census was 23.5, 94% occupancy, and ED visits were 346 compared to the budget of 335. Want to report on our investor call. On March 21st, Steve Daniel, our CFO, and I held an investor call for our revenue bond holders. We provided a report on financial performance through the end of 2017 and a reminder of the need to complete the annual cost report to know the actual year-end result. We also provided an update on the affiliation strategy, letting them know that we had decided to end discussions with Astrea Health and renew discussions with organizations that had expressed interest in affiliation but had not submitted a proposal. And during the Finance Committee report, we can talk more about that call if we need to. In emergency services, I want to let you know that we have completed our triennial, I think that's how you say it, renewal of the level 2 cardiac and level 3 stroke certifications with the state. Also, we've held one of two training sessions on air transport. The first one was held on the 2nd of this month, and we'll have another one on the 28th. These training sessions include landing and takeoff at the Hospital of Medical Transport helicopters, and that's being done with Airlift Northwest and Snoqualmie Fire. Our employee satisfaction and culture of patient safety survey is now closed, meaning no more surveys are coming in. Those surveys are being compiled now, and administration, we will be providing a report to the Quality Improvement Committee, our operations team, and this board as soon as we have that report done. Our 340B drug program, reminder, the 340B drug program is a federal program that allows hospitals to acquire drugs at a significant discount. We have now officially launched the 340B drug program, and that was as scheduled on April 1. The financial results of that program will become part of our regular report in the Finance Committee. Rural Health Clinic, another major initiative for this year, which is to convert our two clinics, the hospital-based clinic and the Snoqualmie Ridge Medical Clinic, to rural health clinic status, which provides us with improved reimbursement. As you may recall, this area received a HPSA designation. That's a health provider shortage area designation. In the past, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services provided HPSA designation according to counties, and last year they decided that they would subdivide certain large counties and allow for HPSA designation within areas that clearly had health provider shortages. This area did receive a HPSA designation, which allowed us to apply for rural health clinic status. That application has been completed, and we are awaiting the unannounced survey of the clinics in order to get that approved. Our April work study session on the 25th will have the topics of affiliation update, as I had mentioned, and then a couple of reports that had been put off because we did talk exclusively about affiliation at our last work study session, and that is going over the accomplishments of last year, and then of course our quarterly quality report. And lastly, WISHA and AWPHD, the annual Rural Hospital Leadership Conference, Actually, the agenda is out now, and you can go online and take a look at that. But the dates for this year are Sunday, June 24th through Wednesday, the 27th. And I ask that you please let Valerie know if you plan on attending this year. And that way we can shore up the reservations or let rooms go as needed. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for our CEO?
Yeah, Mr. Parker, I thought April work study was on compliance.
Tonight we will get the compliance report.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Tell us. Commissioner Pollard.
When you had your conference with the investors, did they have any questions or did they express any concerns about the affiliation problem? And
There was only one question about affiliation. That was they wanted to understand why it was that we felt that there wasn't a match, and we talked about some of the major deal points around the role of the district going forward post-transaction and the issue of cash retention. I'm glad you asked that question because the other interesting thing about that call was there were zero questions about the finances.
so there were no other questions?
No.
The only question had to do with affiliation.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I have other questions, but perhaps others do.
Does anybody else have any questions? Commissioner Pollard, you have the floor.
Okay. We mentioned here the employee satisfaction, and that's going to be interesting to see. When's the last time we did a patient satisfaction survey? I know we've done them.
The patient satisfaction surveys are done continually, and they're reported as part of the quality report.
So we don't get a separate patient satisfaction survey.
We don't do that. So the patient satisfaction survey is one that is approved by CMS and administered by HealthStream. They're the largest CMS-approved surveyor in the country, and our patients are constantly, they come in for a visit. They will go into the random selection of patients who will receive a phone survey, and all that data then is reported directly to CMS and to us. We actually don't take the data and send to CMS. CMS gets it directly from the surveyor, but we also get copies of that, and as I mentioned, it's reported in the quality
when will
report.
that come up again with our quality?
In the quarterly quality report.
Okay, when is that scheduled?
It's scheduled for our next work study session.
Okay, our next one?
Mm-hmm.
Not this month. But
Yeah, this month.
this month?
Yes.
Oh, good. So
Yeah.
we'll see those figures. Very good. Okay, nice. I have further questions.
Can I offer something also on that, Commissioner Pollard? I think we got emails, I know I did, from a customer or a client that was getting being asked questions from that organization a couple times and was not happy about it because the information they wanted, she felt, was invasive for her privacy. So it is active. You know it's active if somebody's called and said, I don't like doing this and I don't want to do
I
this.
think that only went to you.
No, I received it
I didn't
too.
get a copy.
I did.
I think it went to all the
Spikers,
commissioners.
did you get it? If you didn't, Commissioner Pollard, I will see if I can find it and give it.
Please.
To you.
send it
Yeah.
me. That's-
And if I don't, remind me.
Okay.
Okay.
That's fair. Okay. On the 340B drug program, is that break on the prices of drugs, is that only for inpatients or can we pass that along to outpatients?
We pass that along to outpatient pharmacies who are able to, through an agreement with us, acquire those drugs at a reduced rate, and then we share those savings.
You mean like if one of our patients goes to Bartell's?
Correct.
They will get the lower price because of their affiliation with us.
Their pricing remains constant. The acquisition cost is lower, and we receive that credit back from the retail pharmacy.
Okay, very good. All right. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other questions? And we will move on. Skip Hauser, our general counsel. do you have some wisdom for us?
The yellow sheet.
Good evening, Yellow Sheet.
Getting
It's
familiar.
going to stand out.
This one was triggered by
Thank you.
Secretary Spikers.
Thank you.
He caused me to do a little research. At the last meeting, you may recall, he said, I can't vote on approving the minutes because I wasn't at the meeting. And I thought that I read Robert's Rules of Order. It says you could. So I went and researched that, and sure enough, here's the rules that deal with minutes. Reading and approval. The chair says, Secretary will read the minutes. However, in organizations where copies of the minutes of each previous meeting are prepared and sent to all the members in advance, the chair just announces that's been done and you don't have to read them out loud. And I'm sure that Valerie likes that she doesn't have to read out loud all the minutes. Minutes omitted unless any member requests that they be read. I don't think Valerie would be very happy if that was a request either. You can ask that they be dispensed. Dispensing doesn't mean you're not going to read them. It just means they're going to be approved at a later date. So this specific chapter can be found on page 354. But if you want to learn about more dispensing, that's on page 474. So if any reason the minutes or other meetings in addition to the last meeting have not been read, they're each read and approved first in the order of the date from earliest to latest. And all but the smallest meetings the secretary stands. A formal motion to approve the minutes is not necessary. You do not have to move the minutes, although such a motion is not out of order. It's very common, very practical, and it's used all the time. You do not have to move them. And the reason being is, after they've been read, or after the chair notes that they've been offered approval, are there any corrections to the minutes? And pauses. If the president doesn't hear any, then they are approved. Or if corrections are proposed, they're usually handled by unanimous consent. But if any member objects to the proposed correction, then it becomes a motion to amend, and then you have to go back and have a vote. Here's the key as to what Commissioner Spikers, Secretary Spikers had. After any proposed corrections have been disposed of, and when there is no response to the chair's inquiry, are there any questions? The chair says, there being no corrections to the minutes stand or are approved as read, or as approved as corrected. The minutes are thus approved without any formal vote, even if a motion for their approval has been made. The only proper way to object is to offer a correction to it. It should be noted that a member's absence from the meeting for which minutes are being approved does not prevent the member from participating in the correction or approval. Because you believe in the veracity of the secretary or your note taker, and you can do that. If you don't believe that, you can, of course, abstain. So, Commissioner Spikers, you can always abstain, and you did abstain because you didn't think you participated. But you're not required to, because you're not actually approving the minutes as you recall them. You're approving them as they were written.
It's just that me having to sign and initial each page got me a little bit concerned.
Okay.
You know, putting my signature or an initial on a document that's going to be offered to the public.
Without reading.
It rings a bell in my background
Sure.
of what I should or should not be.
Because you cannot attest to it. That would be an attorney thinking that I can't attest that I was there and heard that, so how can I approve? But you can, according to Robert's rules, and that's how you are governed.
I don't follow that it says here the absence of a member does not exclude them from participating in their correction or approval.
Correct.
How would they correct or approve if they're absent from the meeting?
Robert's Rules of Order says you can approve, you can vote, or you can say, I think the minutes are incorrect. Now, I think it'd be difficult, Commissioner Pollard, to say why they're incorrect because you weren't at the meeting, but they could say maybe there's a misspelling. My name was misspelled. You'd ask that they be corrected. The minutes be corrected.
So this would be in advance of the meeting? That person
No, it would not be in advance of the meeting, it'd be at the meeting.
Okay, now the person's not there at the meeting.
No, it's when the minutes are being approved from the subsequent meeting. So Commissioner Spikers misses the meeting.
Right.
He shows up for the meeting tonight, says, I wasn't here last month, but I'm going to vote on approving the minutes. He'd be allowed to do that. He'd also be allowed to correct the minutes, even though he missed the prior meeting where the minutes were taken up.
But he has to be at this meeting when they're being looked at.
Correct.
In order to participate, that is correct or approved.
I would think so, yes.
Thank you.
Yes. And then finally, Roberts makes this note in here. Sometimes he has editorial comments, and he says the practice of sending to all members advance copies of the minutes as drafted by the secretary has both advantages and disadvantages. And then he goes on, what we would call in the legal system dicta, he goes on to just provide a little comment that says it's natural for the members to prefer to study them beforehand or be better prepared to offer corrections. But then he goes on to say, on the other hand, the minutes do not become minutes and assume their essential status as the official record until they have been approved. And before this happens, the secretary's drafts may be materially modified in the correction process. So members may miss some of the corrections. He's addressing a bookkeeping function where you have a set of minutes that were draft, that were mailed out to you, and you keep those. Well, those may not be the official minutes because they had not yet been approved. And so his caution is make sure they're always stamped draft. And if they're given to the public, of course, you want the public to know these have not yet been adopted, they're just draft.
Valerie always stamps them.
She does indeed. And that's why she does it. She knows Roberts. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
That was very informative. Okay, we now have our consent agenda. Do I have a motion with the consent?
I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda as drafted at this point.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? No opposing. Okay. Now we're going to do physician,
That was part of the consent agenda.
this was executive session?
No, position credentialing.
Yes, it is. Physician credentialing,
Well, that was part of the consent.
yes, already, it was. All right, so we need committee reports now.
No,
We're gonna go
executive session.
Oh, we are. And I even have it written down right here. All right. Next, the Board of Commissioners will now go into executive session. The purpose of tonight's executive session is to discuss with our legal counsel potential or actual litigation involving the district as authorized by RCW 42.30.110I. It is anticipated that the executive session will be concluded in approximately 20 minutes. No action will be taken during this executive session.
And Commissioners, I would request that Steve Daniel, our compliance officer, remain for this executive session, given the fact that he's been intimately involved in all correspondence regarding the issue at hand.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
As well as our attorney, right?
It's our compliance officer.
Yeah.
I would think so.
Well, yes, yeah.
We are reconvening the board meeting for Snoqualmie Valley Hospital after a short executive session. We are now at committee reports, and Finance Committee is next in line.
All right, thank you. I appreciate it. I trust everyone has been able to look at the finance report, because that came out a couple weeks ago. Quite enough time, I would think, to look it over. Although we did lose some money, we were ahead of projected losses, which to me is great, because February, I know pretty much I don't ever remember February that we actually were in the black ever. And it's because we only have 28 days, and we tend to break even, or at least lately, on the 30-day months, go ahead on the 31-day months, and lose on the 28 for sure. So we're so that's a good thing. I didn't see a lot of discrepancies. Did you, Dariel, on things that were out of line as far as variances and whatnot? I know that we had to do some. There was an insurance payment that was higher. The utilities were higher because of we had a little
Cold weather.
Yeah. Than colder than normal, and I remember I did ask questions, and hopefully everybody will trust that I did ask every one of the questions that raised an eyebrow in the variances. They weren't that bad.
I think one of the most important things that we did too is Steve gave a report on their bondholder, investor bondholder at the time, and that meeting and telephone call was good.
Yeah. So that's the main. I mean, if you look at, we're way ahead of our the bottom of the covenant issues, so we're way ahead of that. If you look at days in cash, and this is the first month we've went over 9 million in unrestricted cash. By the way, that tends to go up and down. based on different payments and projected Meridian reimbursement rates. We're hoping that we won't have to pay too much, that we're pretty much in line, but we're getting more efficient. We're actually saving the federal government a lot of money in the past year.
And I think we're also making some money off the bonds that didn't we put some money in our cash or something in investments?
Yeah, we did some investment, and
Yeah.
we're making some money there.
Yeah, some bond money.
So that's a good thing, even though it's not a lot, but when you add it all up, and when you're only looking at a shoestring budget half the time.
Anything helps.
Yes, if it's $50, it would be better, and it's a lot more than $50. I think it's going to be about $50,000 a year or something like that. I don't remember.
So I think that was a good choice.
So we did one of the things that came up that because of my background, which I shouldn't look at my background about things when I look at things, but there's a capital expenditure proposal.
Yes.
For updating the thermostats in the clinics. And Dr. Whitcoff had explained that there are many days that we can't use the clinic rooms.
Too cold.
It's either too cold or too hot,
Yeah.
and they cannot regulate that. And they tried having someone going there like 4 times a day to adjust the thermostats, and that didn't work out. And I said, well, it seems to me that we're being constructively evicted from those rooms. Because if we can't use them for the purpose that we agreed to in the beginning, then it seemed to me that they need to do something about it, not us. So rather than getting a big fight with them, sometimes you can talk to the landlord, casually and say, can we get a break? Can you pitch in for this? So hopefully Tom has done that or will do that with the landlord.
Yeah.
So
Steve has actually been doing a great job connecting with them, and I think we have a call with them now scheduled.
We'll call it the broker to talk about
The broker,
options.
right,
Yeah.
right. So Steve has some connections in the broker community, property management community, and we're picking their brains about how to approach that conversation with the
I just
landlord.
hesitate to deal with property management companies. They really don't care too
What
much.
we found is that the property management company is local and the owner is in China.
Yeah. That's usually what happens.
Okay.
If I recall, that's been brought up about that
Facility.
the facility about the
Okay.
yeah.
Well, maybe we
Property
can get a
manager should
discount.
be.
But we're working that.
Well, maybe we can get a discount on the lease coming up when it's due or something. I don't
Yeah.
know. But we should be able to bring that up as a negotiating tool anyway. So anyway, I raised
Right.
that. Also, one of the things that the board gave a mandate to about 2 months ago, month and a half ago, that we would figure out a compensation, we would try to figure out some kind of compensation schedule and parameters for Tom.
CEO position.
And so there's been a proposal for approximately $3,500 to do the study and to propose some kind of a compensation package dependent on
Performance.
performance. So I that's something that I always wanted to see with any CEO for us. Performance makes sense. So that was sort of the cheapest I understood to do this study to figure this out. It's always best to go outside. I know that we had a big discussion here and we finally approved a bonus for him. And there were a lot of differences of opinions about that and what we should do for salary increases or not. There really isn't anything there for bonuses or I think it'd be prudent to find out if what other CEOs in similar types of critical access facilities actually get. So, and the study is about $3,500. So I think there'll be more to it, not maybe at the next board meeting.
Yeah, we'll have a proposal to the finance committee
So,
and then bring it to the board.
But I just wanted to let you know that that is coming up,
3,500.
and you should probably,
Yeah.
when that does come up in any kind of package, you should probably research and just decide what kind of discussion we want to have at the board meeting.
How did you come up with the 3,500?
Well, we told staff to find out a compensation package and bring it to us. And I think they felt uncomfortable coming up with their own compensation, Tom coming up with his own compensation package.
We
So-
viewed as
Yeah.
biased, quite frankly.
So,
Yeah,
you know, and I would probably too,
Yeah.
so that's kind of where it was at. So,
Okay.
rather than him, I'd be in that position, I'd probably say, well, yeah, I want X and this is the way I want it. Well, we've got a good relationship with Tom, and I think it probably have an outside person come in and say, these are the
Impartial
options.
party.
And here you go. And because we are now obligated within 90 days to come up with something for our earlier,
Agreement and
for
discussion.
our February vote.
Or it was January.
January?
Yeah.
Okay.
So okay, just to be clear, 3,500 is for the study.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
And recommendation.
And recommendations. Okay.
So just to let you know, we're not voting on it. We'll ask for opinions
Okay.
next month.
Yeah.
So I just want to let you know it's coming, so you can decide what your input is on that. Okay, so those are the
Point
things, the
of
major things.
clarification.
Yep.
Is this going to focus on the CEO compensation, or does this involve a survey of other
I think it's going to be a vote.
CEOs of all critical access hospitals in the state?
I'm pretty
for
sure that they're
example?
going to be, it better be based on other critical
Can I-
access
I can
hospitals.
comment.
Okay.
There will be kind of what do others do on market, because you've got to prove that you're doing industry, what the industry
Standard
does, and
industry
it's not
standard.
excessive. So yes, there will be.
In terms of.
Comparison to what other hospitals have said.
An incentive compensation.
Incentive
though. We're gonna-
compensation.
Not, because we've already done a sort of a survey to find out what other hospitals are
Right.
paying CEOs. So this has to focus on what other hospitals are doing on incentive payments. Is that correct?
Part of the study needs to be that way, because you have to demonstrate to the IRS that you are not excessive in how you are paying your CEO as a not-for-profit.
My understanding
So that's-
is they'll look at total
Yeah,
compensation.
total compensation, but how does that compare with what others are doing?
Yeah, I'd like to see what they're using as incentive compensation, as well as the general
That will be
salary
Part
comparisons.
of this study,
Okay.
It's one part.
I'm hoping that it will look at hospitals that are more slanted towards swing bed programs.
Yeah. They're
Versus some
they're similar to
hospitals
us.
that have multiple specialties
Yeah.
that have to be
That's very
managed.
important, David.
Yeah.
So that's what I'll be looking at an eye on. So just to let
Tell
the,
the consultants, 'cause
All right.
I have got someone independent.
Okay.
Because of,
all right.
okay.
But you want apples to apples, not apples to
Yeah.
figs.
Then they know that.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Well, enough said on that. There was a couple notes that I had. Our days in accounts receivable is down a bit. Our 340B rural health clinic should push the bottom line up a bit. We are also studying the ROI of purchasing versus lease of specialty beds.
Right.
And whether it makes sense financially or not. And let's see here. I noted that we did take a small loss, but our expenses were also below budget too. So it's a good thing. I hope that the clinics pick up the pace on the ridge. That's my last comment. So with that, is there any questions?
Well, I was just delighted that this had to do with the thermostats, and actually it's more complicated than that. It's a central control system. But when I saw capital improvements and HVAC upgrade, I was thinking, you know, a heating system. But this is really an issue of the controls.
Yeah.
It's the control unit.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's only the, yeah.
Somehow that's a relief, but I do think, was it substandard before, or are we being too fussy or something? Otherwise, I think it ought to be the responsibility of the owner.
Property management, normally when there's a thermostat or any of that, the best practice for property managers that they cover that. That's part of their camp charges.
But on a commercial lease, it's different.
Commercial.
The terms can be different.
Well,
So-
but we do the commercial lease. We do the
Yeah.
same thing. We have
Well, our
commercial.
commercial lease says we take care of everything.
Oh, is that what it
basically.
says on? Yeah,
It's
I
on
guess
the
it
lease.
depends on what. Yeah, okay.
It's on the lease.
The agreement.
So,
Okay,
but
We had someone
so
I would
that's what
agree.
it says.
Not
Okay,
yeah.
we have to take care of that.
But
Because it pays-
something we can still
Consider, look into it. Yeah.
Okay, are we ready to move on to
Well,
medical?
one other thing,
Oops.
I would ask to approve the warrants at this
yes.
time.
But can I just ask a question real quick? This is just for February. We don't have March. Is that right?
No,
March
this is
doesn't close.
March.
Oh, doesn't come. Oh, this all was for February.
That's February.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Quick, but not backward.
We'll come backwards. But we don't have March though.
Do we have a motion for the warrants?
I do have that motion at this point to approve $2,618,854.96. And that includes, of course, payroll warrants, vendor warrants, payroll tax, auto deposits, and retirement 457, 403B, and match claims.
I second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll move forward to a vote. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
Ayes have it, and it passes. Who's doing medical committee this month? Joan?
Miss Joan.
Miss Joan.
I'll do the ad hoc.
You ready? Basically, the hospital district participated in the Snook Valley Senior Center Spring Health Fair on April the 3rd. Very good presentations were put out. I was there. Also, just to let you know that our lovely, talented medical assistant Deborah is there every Wednesday to do labs and check blood pressures, etc. There's a new communication tool, and please don't ask me too much about it. NEDX demonstrated being trialed with med-surg staff, allows real-time, non-generative text communication between staff on HIPAA-safe cloud-based platform. It's a little cell phone gizmo computer. And its information goes to a cloud that we can't reach. The DOH cardiac and stroke reader certifications were submitted, awaiting their response. Airlift training is going to be, well, it already has been one day in April in collaboration with Snoqualmie Fire Department. That involves the landing of helicopter plane at the back door to pick up an airlift somewhere. Lab, this is a good thing too. Percent of testing now done in-house is 94%.
Internal. 6% external, which
Yeah.
is good.
Mhm.
Yes, that's really.
Okay, antimicrobial stewardship, quality measures were reviewed. Delegated health plan credentialing, we will be involved in a demonstration of our capability for the next year with the anticipation of being allowed to do credentialing on behalf of the health plans, thus expediting the process. We've already voted to allow the recredentialing for several people. We reviewed the most recent 3 in March of 2017, the DOH Hospital and Pharmacy Survey was reviewed for insight to the process for constructing and executing a plan of correction. Any questions?
Explain a little bit about the Friends of Youth under clinics
Oh,
and the Snoqualmie Valley Hospital clinical bilateral embedding and clinic staff into other sites. You want to tell us what that's about?
Friends of Youth is primarily up in the North Bend, etc. region, and we're working with them to have a plan to deal with their medical issues and drug, etc. And Tom can probably be a little more clear.
It's a two-way relationship that we're working on.
Sounds like it.
With Friends of Youth. Our studies have shown that when you embed behavioral health providers in medical clinics and medical care providers in behavioral health clinics, you do a better job of helping to reduce any stigma of seeing a mental health provider. You also do a better job of the handoffs that should be occurring between mental health and behavioral health counselors and your medical care providers. And so we will be having Friends of Youth, behavioral health specialists providing services in our clinic, and we'll be having our clinic providers providing medical care services in the Friends of Youth Center in order to accomplish those two goals.
Emma and I were both at a meeting that Kathy Lambert had this week, and that's one of the things that were addressed. And the counselors were there talking, 2 different counselors, one being a physician and one being mental health, along with police, local police, the feds,
FBI,
the FBI, and the
DEA.
CIA, DEA. They were all there. It was very, very informative.
Fire department probably also.
I don't know.
No,
if
there
they
was no
spoke,
fire department.
but there
just
was undercover
DEA,
cops.
FBI, and, King County sheriffs were
Yeah.
there.
And they gave a very good informational program. I think Kathy
Opioids,
came up.
tracking opioids, and of course they elaborated more on the mental health.
The mental health was one of the major topics, but it was a very good opportunity to hear what's happening from law enforcement, what's happening with Friends of Youth and in the Valley, and trying to help address the addiction problems and other things and illicit drugs that are on the streets. So I just wanted to make a comment that that's a really good thing for us to be involved in.
And we heard this in Chelan last year about the effectiveness of embedding in this cross help between medical and behavioral health, and that's exactly what this is.
Yeah.
Sounds really good.
Couple of comments. I went to this the Snow Valley Senior Center Spring Health Fair on April 3rd, and it was nicely done. Deborah was there for that as well.
Yeah.
So I'm sure Joan was there. About this unannounced survey for the Real Health Clinic, do we have any tip-off as when that's going to happen?
Very much like the Department of Health survey. And we actually support that methodology because of the way that it drives all surveyed organizations to be ready at all times.
That's a good idea. You may not have seen the Valley Record today that came out today or yesterday, and that is they have the full front page on opiates.
I did read that article.
Probably got to do with that.
It was the session that you're talking about, I believe.
That Emma and I both were at.
Yeah.
There was also an announcement of where people could drop off drugs. and we weren't mentioned.
No, and that's on purpose. It's a whole process that you have to have in place, and the fire department has done an excellent job of taking that on for the community.
So we don't want to.
We don't take drop-off drugs, and we refer people to the fire department.
Okay, very good.
It's not so much about, they were also at the meeting, they're talking about unused drugs, the drugs that have been,
Yeah.
where to drop them off. I have also attended a League of Women Voters civil discourse, and it was on healthcare reform. And, it was very interesting. There's several different issues that was posed on each table. One of which that I was I was looking into what, charity care, what this group could, not us, but the League of Women Voters are working on. So they're working on one of which is the charity care. They want to know whether one of the question was, is healthcare a right or a commodity? So there was that discussion about, life, liberty, and justice, why it is a right, but some people think it is a commodity because, it has a lot to do with our economic, growth and all that. And the other thing that was mentioned was whether it should be a single payer or, should we conform to the single payer system or a two-tier system? I don't know. So that was one of those are just a few issues that was brought up during that discourse. So they're gonna send us the narrative of what was discussed, and I'll share that the total narrative for each table that had brought up the particular issue. So I thought that'd be interesting to know what.
That would be great.
Yeah. So I will share that once we receive it from the voters, the League of Women Voters, because they're compiling the entire discourse. So that would be good. So anyway,
Thanks, Emma.
I thought I just wanted to share that
Question.
so we know what the healthcare.
Yes, Commissioner Pollard.
Yeah, with regards to credentialing, I ran across an article. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to read it. It said, role of board members in credentialing. And I guess maybe we ought to ask that question. What is our role? When I raised this with
I
the
did read
previous
that article.
administration, I suggested we put it under the consent agenda because we're not told anything about the individuals, and the superintendent at the time said, oh, no, you need to know who these people are and so on, and get familiar with them. But we're not getting familiar with them. And I just wonder.
Can I make a quick comment? Because when I started here, I was concerned that these people were being approved, and I didn't know anything about the process whatsoever. I spent a half day with Barbie Donovan, and everything that she does, I'm serious. And I was absolutely convinced that the credentialing, if it's the same procedures and the step-by-step analysis that I'm sure it is, if not, it's even better now. I totally rely on that. I would encourage all of the commissioners to go through a half a day or even a couple hours to see what they actually do with these credentialing, and they will explain everything. And that's my experience. So I rely on the credentialing process, not so much and the people that work here.
Well, I appreciate that. As a matter of fact, we might have her come in at a work study session or even a board meeting and have her briefly describe the actual process.
I have to
That's
look at the
not
Congress.
HIPAA sensitive.
Been a few months now, but Dr. Wickup did a training session for us on the credentialing process.
Yes.
And,
But I'm thinking about this person that David's mentioning that actually does it.
Was she's no longer doing the credentialing? She still is?
She still does it. Yeah. And everything that Dr. Wickup provided you was, it was a presentation of the work that Barbie does.
Very intricate process.
I'll just make one more comment,
Sure.
and that is that I think Commissioner Spiker said it well. that the board absolutely has a role with medical staff. The primary role is, as you mentioned, to make sure that you understand our process and that you're comfortable with the process that we're using. That's why Dr. Wickham did that presentation, because we believe that helps you fulfill that one of your many, but that one fiduciary responsibility.
Yeah, at one time I had that was an issue also, because we're, for the medical committee, because we're not approving, but we discussed about it. And Dr. Whitcup explained that there is the medical executive board that goes through that process, and they're really, so I trust that they're doing it best.
I trust too, but
Yeah.
I'm getting to the point that the previous superintendent made of, you've got to know these doctors. And so it's just a question of, yes, we trust them, but is there a further role from the board to know these doctors personally, by their biographies or anything about them? At least that was why at that time there was resistance to the concept of putting it under a consent agenda, because I think we all have confidence in the process.
I'm glad to hear that. That's absolutely appropriate. And I'll just mention, and this is reiteration because some of you know this, but the Medical Executive Committee is made up of our staff physicians. And they serve as volunteers on this committee, and they review every application. Barbie does all the research, and then it's presented to the Medical Executive Committee. Dr. Wickup is not a voting member in the credentialing process. It is the independent medical staff. Oh, I would say independent, but it's the elected members of the medical staff, the executive committee, who do those reviews and vote on those credentials.
Would it be helpful if, how many doctors, when you go to their clinics, they have their little card and it shows their credentials and all that. Maybe that's something that might be a good to answer your question, because you can't meet them one-on-one all the time, but maybe just have a brief bio of them, or that you can, like a little
A picture.
what do you call
A picture and a bio.
a picture of bio.
We
just
actually
something.
have a lot of that
Do they?
already done. So
And they're on the webpage.
And maybe
That-
they'd actually appreciate that we are getting to know
I mean,
them.
to take it
Chair
with us.
would like to move on.
Okay.
The chair would like us to
Yeah.
move on the discussion, if we could please. And, all right, so facilities, Commissioner Pollard, are you ready?
Yes. I think one of the interesting things is we had a guest at this meeting on March 26th, and that is James Mayhew, who's a council member in the city of Snoqualmie. And he's particularly interested in the kinds of issues we address in the facilities committee. So that's why he came. And it was a surprise. He even walked in 5 or 10 minutes late, but was welcomed, and he participated. So that was wonderful. At any rate, we had no new business, but we had the old business, which included the changes to the bylaws that we were going to recommend to the bylaws ad hoc committee, and so that was done. And then the charter changes are being held until the bylaws are approved and so forth, because that's connected to the bylaws. At any rate, we spent a little time on that. We always spend a lot of time on signage and how do we get people to come to the hospital by recognizing the various signs we have on the highways and around town and so forth. So once again, we did that, and I won't get into those details. They're all recorded in our 3-page minutes, which Valerie prepares so well. Now, one thing that Tom, why don't you mention something about the signage and the money we're going to save by this new approach on signage around the hospital?
So we got a bid on signs around the hospital after having a walking focus group take a look at what the needs were. And so we've actually gone 2 iterations with our sign company just tweaking the request to try and get the cost down. We've got it down to a very reasonable amount compared to where we started. I don't have the number right in front of me, but even then, I told the committee that I wanted to wait. It's well under the capital amount, but I still didn't want to incur the operating expense of those signs until we see what the first quarter looks like. So
Yeah.
we'll see what March close looks like and see how we're doing before we take on that expense.
Well, I think we started out estimating around $10,000, and now we're below 4,000
Yeah.
tax. So as you say, let's sit tight until we have more financial results.
Now,
I
what's
think
study?
excuse me,
I have a
did somebody have a question?
Yeah, I do. What's the study being done by CH2M Hill?
CH2.
Yeah, CH2, yeah,
M Hill.
which is,
I can
used to
answer
be
that
that.
question.
Okay, yeah.
That's a study being done for, I believe, Department of Transportation on the potential use of the old way station. There are two possible uses of the way station. One is to provide an additional on-ramp lane for westbound I-90 off of the Parkway. The other hoped for use of that space is a staging area for the construction of the diverging diamond interchange at Highway 18 and I-90. So CH2M Hill has been charged with doing a study of whether or not that's possible. Can they get both of those purposes out of the available space?
Now, did we
Oh,
do
no.
that? No, we didn't do that. Okay, okay. Because that's going to change when construction happens,
Yeah,
possibly.
this is just reporting what I learned.
Okay.
These are some things I pick up as I go to the Economic Development Commission meeting for the city of Snowball.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Paul.
Yeah, very good, Tom. And I wish we had something more positive to propose or to inform you of with respect to that interchange. We're still talking about 2021, and until then, that mess continues.
Oh, honey, that's a lot better than what it was scheduled. It was scheduled for 2040.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have the original report on that
I thought it was
intersection.
2023, but anyhow, they keep moving it up. But of course, in the final analysis, it's going to be whether
Move
we
it up.
got the money to do it in 2021.
I know.
But thank you, Dariel, for that, since that's your specialty. We mentioned last time that we bought $100 worth of $1 tickets to give out, let our front desk give out at their discretion where people need that assistance to get to the hospital on the Snoqualmie Valley transportation system. Joan, did you have something to say? Okay, on traffic safety, this is complex and very interesting, and I thought I'd ask Steve Daniel to go over this quickly.
Tom already talked about the work on the interchange the state is doing. The city is conducting traffic surveys to see if there's a need for a solution, a change at our intersection. And 2 of the 3 surveys have been done. No need has been identified. They're doing a 3rd study this summer. If the 3rd study determines that there's a need for traffic enhancement of some type, a light, what do we got? Roundabout.
But this is new
rumble
development
strips.
projects, right?
I would think a couple rumble strips would pretty much slow a few of those
Yeah,
guys down.
Then we
From
could
50 to
incur,
20.
we could incur a cost.
Traffic calming.
So
That's all it needs.
if the 3rd study comes back, there's no need for enhancement, we will not incur a cost. So it's unknown. If future development takes place that causes a need for a traffic revision, we would probably not incur it. The future developers would be charged with that cost. Right now, there's no need that has been identified at that intersection. And we're tracking that because.
This one right out
put a-
here?
Yeah,
29.
put a document together on it.
It's not the traffic, I think. It's more or less it's how fast they come up.
Around that corner.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, and you know, they've done some interesting traffic quieting down in the Fall City area. They've got zigzag lines and they got rumple strips and so forth. And we could install on a permanent basis one of those signs that provides the speed limit and then it says your speed is, etc. I've seen that. Matter of fact, coming down from Swedish Hospital, you will see a permanent installation there. And I think
Coming in
that would
Preston,
be very
too.
good because people, they don't stay to 35 miles an hour if it's wide open. And of course, sometimes backed up all the way to Jacobia, but let's assume it's open, they drive like 60. And it's really scary. So if we could have one of those speed checks
Speed trap.
permanently installed, I don't go for the portable one. I think that's not a good idea. But if we could get the city to help us on that, it would really be good. So anyway, that's all related to traffic safety. One thing I'll mention is that Tom provided us an update on Panorama Apartments. This is going to be quite interesting. It says here it will now go to civil design review and so forth. There was an issue about the building house height, and that was approved at 4 stories. So that's going to provide how many housing units, Tom?
191.
191, right up here, folks, and that means more patients. So I think that's positive. And Jim Mayhew, in our minutes, it's recorded here that he offered additional information regarding this project, the fact that the construction is slated to begin this summer. Access to this project will only be by Jacobia Street.
We will,
And there's not going to be a through road to the hospital.
we will anticipate this summer to be a very busy traffic because the hotel, which is the Hampton Suite, will be opening in October. So
we'll have tremendous construction.
between the development that's going on and the hotel that is coming up, opening up soon. So we will have a lot of traffic, which will hopefully help our hospital.
So they're notifying all
Yes.
Ridge residents like you, for example,
Yes.
about this.
Right, that would be in the homeowners newsletter that they always send out every month.
Thank you for that
For the-
introduction. And of course, Emma's also a member of the facilities committee, so we appreciate her input. Okay, rather than to take any more time with this, which I could do with a lot of fun, we are continuing to have the hospital serve with free meeting rooms for organizations like Scouts, Stroke Support Group, and so forth. Encompass is holding their board meeting monthly here, and we put out, Tom has put out the word in the Yahoo community sites that we are available for organizations to use our facilities as being part of the community. Thank you.
Are there
No more
any
questions.
other questions for Commissioner Pollard? Hearing none, we will move on. Thank you, Commissioner Pollard.
Turn, huh?
Yeah, and I believe next we have the Ad Hoc Bylaws Committee.
Okay,
Emma's going to address us.
the Bylaws Ad Hoc Committee met for its second meeting. It was March 8, and the committee reviewed the prior minutes and concurred that they represented the initial meeting approach that we are going to be undertaking. The committee also reviewed a draft memorandum, which I did say in the last board meeting that we will be receiving a memorandum from CEO Parker, and he agreed to collect, and he be the depository of all the comments that are forthcoming from the executive leadership team and the Board of Commissioners. And of course, questions, comments, concerns should be returned by April 6th. That was the deadline. So we did say that if you have any more other questions this afternoon, whether if you want to, because he did not, except for one commissioner, which is Commissioner Smackers, you receive a comment on.
I sent
You
some.
replied, I know, except
I
for
sent
you.
one.
Not,
You're the one that,
no, you're the only one that.
I'm the only one that made comments? Oh, I got
Yeah, mine.
So if you have some comments, I think we will extend. I think that was one of the things that we will be a little flexible because like Commissioner Pollard, normally we receive a lot of comments from you.
I've given verbal ones, but.
Oh, okay.
Right,
Yeah, I did. I did
not
mention
have
some of the
time
verbal
to
ones.
Submit my written comments, and I appreciate the extension.
Okay.
I will say, if it may maybe this is proper time, but remember that the last set of bylaws we approved December 8th, 2016, which means following the 2-year rule, December 8th, 2018.
Yes, yes.
So we have time.
Yes, we understand. We do understand. Okay, we got that. So anyway,
I'm sorry, can I jump in there?
sure.
And just to note that our current bylaws say best efforts to do it within the 2-year time frame.
Yes, because as a matter of fact, we had no bylaw revision from 2008 to 2012.
That's true.
So
Yeah.
we
Very
skipped
major
that period.
deal.
So we're doing our due diligent work.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so prior to the next meeting, we would like, CEO Parker would like to at least hear from all of us prior to the next meeting of April 12, which is today.
And I will say that President Norris did provide me her input verbally when we met.
Okay. The committee also discussed the need to update the board on the committee's work and advising them of the memorandum that would be, which already it happened. We also discussed what an appropriate set of bylaws might look like and what those characteristics would do so that upon completion of the review, any proposed recommendations for changes would compare the finished product with their expectations. So some of the characteristics of an appropriate set of bylaws would be as follows. Clarity in being clearly understood, concise, comporting and complying with the revised Code of Washington laws, organized in such a way that they are user-friendly, complete and not lacking information, grammatically correct, reading well, and without typographical errors, written at an appropriate reading level, anticipating potential future issues, and being flexible or adaptable in order to address such. Then we also identified characteristics of bylaws that are not well written: disorganized, incomplete, conflicting information and sections, utilizing words that are not defined, not clearly written, use of acronyms that are not defined, not user-friendly, written in technical jargon, redundancy in the sections and documents, and not easy to read or utilize. The committee then discussed whether or not there is a value in creating a separate document that pertains to rules and procedures pertaining to board meetings and bylaws that address governance. And this afternoon, it was determined, we did not make any decision, we determined that there will be a set of two documents, one on the bylaws and the rules of procedures. And what we did also was General Counsel Skip provided us his bylaws, and we went over the sections, the articles, and we checked to see which of them belongs. O is for operations, P is for process. So where they would fit into, either they fit into the bylaws or they fit into the rules of procedure. So we went over that today to try to there were some here that is P and O, so that would be something to be discussed further. So that's what. Okay, so is that right? So we did the sections and articles was determine what where they belong, whether they belong to the bylaws or the rules of procedure. We were given a set of a sample of different rules of procedure. One came from City of Snoqualmie, and I did get one also, which is policies and procedures from Lake Chelan. And there's another one that was also given by Anne McFarland, and one that Skip you got from another Shoreline. So there were 4 that we were looking at to see which one would fit all together and how, effective and all that stuff that we're going to add into, whether it's a bylaw or it's a rules of procedure. Now, we all determined that maybe the proper thing would be rules of procedure as opposed to policies and procedure. And so that's where we're going, in the next meeting we'll be discussing more about those things. We have not discussed anything on facilities yet. We haven't dissected that. So far we were going to, but we just did not have time to dissect it. Okay, so in the next board bylaws meeting, we will be discussing further as to, where everything fits.
Okay. So I have a question. So are we separating out certain things out of what we have in our bylaws to be something different? Is that what you're saying?
We're looking at what is governance.
Okay. What is governance and what's just policy?
Right, or rules.
Procedures,
right.
Okay.
And we also discussed another topic on request for public records. That would be a totally separate entity as well. We also discussed about some of the work of the committees. They have charters. And so we may have to direct some of the questions that are in the rules of procedures to, refer to the charter of that particular committee to make it more manageable, I guess. So that's pretty much what. Do you have anything to add, Joan?
No, I think you've done a very good job.
Okay.
Sounds like a lot of work.
A lot of work, yes. We want to make sure we do diligent work. We want to make sure everything is. Yeah.
No doubt you are.
Well, thank you.
I'll just make one comment on the public records request item.
Yes.
That was, it's in our bylaws. It's really at the tail end of our bylaws and almost sits there without a proper home or category. And we decided, let's get that into a separate policy. So that's what.
That's where you probably got
That's
your
right,
policies
That's
what
versus
Commissioner
your.
Herron was talking
With
about.
respect to that, there's been so much change on the public information procedure business in the legislature.
Yeah.
That you sure got to check that out, because really, you're obliged to respond to a verbal request. A telephone request. I mean, we can't be too rigid about you got to fill out this form because the state says, no, you don't have to. So it's easy to include a form and say this is the way you do it, but the latest thing is you can't do it that way.
Thank you.
And so, at any rate, it was a very good report, Emma.
Thank you.
One thing I think that separates like rules of procedure and the bylaws is that you look in our current bylaws and it says the meeting may proceed in this fashion. When you're having bylaws, it should be a law in a sense. And where you're going to have some suggestions, that can be in rules of procedure.
Can you write the comments and give it to our depository?
In looking at bylaws from other hospital districts on the internet, one thing I ran across was a hospital district in the state of Washington, and I'm sorry I don't have the name of it now, but I could probably find it again, where they review their rules of procedure every 6 months. They do their bylaws every 2 years, but they scan their rules of procedure every 6 months and say, how can we have our meetings run better? What some minor tweaks that we can do? And it's very easy because you can change it with a motion, whereas if you're going to have to go to the bylaws, it takes a resolution and all that sort of thing. Anyway,
Thank you.
I did submit a question about will we consider rules of procedure and so forth. I'm delighted to hear that's what we're going to be doing.
Yeah, we would really appreciate Commissioner Pollard if you can, the suggestions you made, just
Write them down
right
and
now.
send them.
Yeah, please, that would be nice. Thank
I do
you.
owe you some feedback. Yeah.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for our committee? Thank you, Emma. Very thorough. Old business. I have none written down. Does anybody have any old business that needs to be brought up? Okay. New business, quarterly compliance update. Mr. Daniels, you are up.
All right. Yes. What's that?
Okay, so I'll give you an update of our compliance activity for the previous quarter, what we've done. The board is charged with monitoring the status and the activities of our compliance effort. So, and again, we'll be making quarterly reports.
What are we complying with?
We are complying with all laws, regulations, and business practices. The main source of compliance regulations is the Office of Inspector General of the United States government that has a whole book on the compliance requirements for hospitals. So that's what we're complying with. And we take it to, okay, let's look at recent state regulations and make sure we're complying.
When was the last time you've done this? Do we do this on a
We have
regular
begun
basis?
to do this every quarter. It was the end of last year when I did it last.
You said the Inspector General of the United States. Are we talking about DHHS, Inspector General, where we get periodic reports from?
It's the OIG, Office of Inspector General.
OIG for DHHS, is that correct?
It relates to Medicare mostly.
Yes. That's,
Mostly Medicare. There are other areas though.
yeah, it's DHHS, OIG.
Right. And we have a kind of a quick report card we look at. Billing and coding audits, that's a big compliance issue. A lot of hospitals and medical institutions will get in trouble for what's called charging too much, especially the Medicare. We have billing audits every 2 years, next one's scheduled for next year. Compliance training. We train all employees on compliance issues when they start. We had 22 new employees go through the compliance training this quarter. And then we have an annual update, what we'll talk about. So every employee is required to do an annual update on compliance issues. And then there are postings required for patient information and human resources that we're compliant. We look at those and make sure we're doing that every month. So, next. First quarter activity, audits and reviews. We have completed the pre-work for the audit by our CPA, and that audit will be completed in the second quarter in May of this year. And we have scheduled for the first quarter a IT, information technology, computer security audit. And we'll talk a little bit about cyber issues. No, cyber liability, cyber issues. It's become a big deal. Our medical records are worth a lot on the internet because they contain the type of information that can get a patient's bank account drained. So, and then you also have issues where an employee in a hospital will click on to an attachment, gets a virus in the system, and the hospital is basically, pays a ransom to get rid of it. So that's a big issue for us. So we'll talk a little more about that. Next. Compliance training. We made it compliance training mandatory for all staff last year. They have to complete their compliance training and update in order to be eligible to work here, and we had 100% compliance. It's amazing how that happens when it's mandatory for you to do your job. And then the cybersecurity training we have ongoing. We have what I call phishing, P-H-I-S-H-I-N-G, emails that go out. If an employee clicks on it, they then go to a training site that says, hey, you've got to know where an attachment is coming from, what you're clicking on before you try to open it, because that is the way that systems get infected.
We send out fake bad.
We fake bad emails. And it's interesting, the bad guys on this are getting very, very clever. I got one that was not fake, but it was, I want to be an intern, click on this and see my resume. I knew I wouldn't get that unsolicited. So, and the other thing in the finance area we face is fake instructions to transfer funds. Bit of a story, about less than a week after Tom was appointed CEO, I got a fake email purporting to be him saying, I want you to transfer funds. Well, I knew Tom wouldn't do that. He'd come in and walk into my office and say something. So
Thanks to it all the time.
yeah, oh yeah. So, new employee training, again, we conducted trained 22 employees year to date.
I'll send my husband to you,
Okay.
really.
Last year, the state legislature enacted a sick leave law that we are required to provide most employees with paid sick leave. We were not giving that to employees who work less than 20 hours a week. We changed our practices, changed our procedures. We're now in compliance with that law. They're all receiving that sick leave.
No matter how many hours they work,
Yeah.
but it's prorated or something. Yes.
Yeah, it's prorated in how much they earn. We had to put in a whole set of different procedures and then compare it to state law, which we did. HIPAA, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. Basically, it's the law that says we need to keep patient information confidential. It's called protected health information. That's a big part of the training we give to all employees. And if there is a breach, if there is a release of HIPAA, we need to report it to the HHS. And so, next.
How many breaches have we experienced?
We'll get that. No, none, but we'll talk about it.
Okay.
We encourage employees to report a potential HIPAA issue or breach through Safety Zone. If you think it might be, please do report it. All the incidents are investigated by the compliance officer and the department manager to determine, okay, was there a breach? Was there information released? And they reported through Safety Zone, and we have not had any so far, but we are continuously looking at this, and we encourage people to report. Next. We had 2 potential events reported through March 31st. None were determined to be breaches. No information was released. What happens is I go through a series of questions and talk to the manager, work with the manager, say, was anything released? No. But it's good to have it reported. I don't have eyes on everything, but the employees do. And next. That's it. So that's our activity, our compliance activity. Any questions or anything?
I just point out how important this is to follow what the Inspector General is doing. I get reports once or twice a week from the HHS, Inspector General, and the penalties that they levy on hospitals and individual providers are astounding. We're talking about $1 million penalties, things like that. And so, boy, I know, I'm glad you guys are watching it because we don't want to get into any of that kind of trouble.
The Office of Inspector General publishes their work plan and they update it every month. So every month I go onto their website to say, is there anything that would indicate a new type of activity we need to do compliance-wise? And
Good.
There has not been this year.
Great, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Once again, we're at public comment. Do we have any public comment? There is no public comment, so we move on. There is no new business or action items that need to be done. Do we have anything other than scheduling of our work study meetings? Work study session, April 25th, 2018 at 6 o'clock here, and it's in the north-south. And then the next regular meeting is May 10th, 2018, 6:30, again here at South Elmwood. Is there any other statements or work that anybody thinks need to be done? And how we can do away with packages, I don't think so. Do I have a motion to adjourn? To adjourn. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.